Welcome, dear listener, to another relaxing journey here at Sleepy Mythological History. Thank you for joining us tonight, or whenever you may be listening. Whether you're winding down after a long day or preparing to drift into a peaceful sleep, I invite you to make yourself comfortable, let go of the day's stress, and immerse yourself in the wonders of ancient mythology. Tonight, we're about to embark on a special adventure, one that will take us deep into the mysterious and thrilling world of Greek mythology. But we won't be exploring gods or heroes tonight. No, this time, we'll delve into the realm of creatures so terrifying, so awe-inspiring, that their stories have lived on for centuries. The ancient Greeks believed in monsters, some born from chaos and others created from the very forces of nature. And tonight, we'll meet them all, from the monstrous offspring of Typhon and Echidna, the parents of many fearsome beasts, to the wicked creatures that haunted the minds of ancient storytellers. Before we begin our journey, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here, for choosing to explore these fascinating tales with me. If you're new to our channel, Sleepy Mythological History, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on our soothing storytelling adventures. And if you enjoy the stories tonight, don't forget to leave us a like and a comment. I'd love to hear what you think about these ancient creatures and which one stands out to you the most. So, settle in, take a deep breath, and prepare to be transported to a world where myth and monster intertwine. Let's begin our adventure through the realms of the most legendary, most fearsome creatures of Greek mythology. Are you ready? Let's step into the unknown. Now, let's start at the very beginning. To truly understand the creatures of Greek mythology, we must begin at the very heart of their origins. For the monsters we are about to meet did not emerge by chance. No, they were born from chaos itself, from the union of two of the most fearsome beings to ever walk the earth. At the center of these origins stands Typhon. He was no mere beast, no simple creature. Typhon was the embodiment of chaos, destruction, and raw power. His size alone was enough to strike terror into the hearts of gods and mortals alike. Imagine, if you will, a creature so enormous that his head brushed against the stars. His body was a twisted mass of serpentine coils, with wings that could blot out the Sunday. He had 100 heads, each spewing fire, and his voice was a terrifying mixture of roars, screams, and the howls of 1,000 creatures. Typhon was the very essence of nature's wild, untamable fury. But it wasn't just his appearance that made him so fearsome. It was his strength, an unstoppable force of destruction. The gods themselves trembled at the thought of him. In fact, Typhon was so powerful that he dared to challenge Zeus, the king of the gods, for control over the heavens. Their battle, fierce and epic, shook the very foundations of the earth. Lightning flashed, storms raged, and mountains crumbled as Zeus fought to protect the world from Typhon's wrath. It is said that, in the end, Zeus struck Typhon down with his mighty thunderbolts. But the power of Typhon was not fully extinguished. His body, even in defeat, became a source of turmoil, and from it came more chaos, more monsters, and more challenges for the gods. But Typhon was not alone in his monstrous reign. Beside him stood Echidna, the mother of all monsters. Echidna, unlike Typhon, was a creature of more subtle but equally terrifying power. Picture, if you will, a woman's face, beautiful and serene, but with the lower body of a serpent, coiling endlessly in the dark. She was a being of mystery and darkness, hiding away in the caves of the earth, where she gave birth to some of the most legendary and dangerous monsters in all of mythology. Echidna was no mere mother. She was a creator of terror, of beasts that would haunt the dreams of men for centuries to come. From her womb came some of the most famous creatures of Greek myth, each one more frightening than the last. Together, Typhon and Echidna formed a bond that would forever change the landscape of Greek mythology. Their union brought forth a generation of monsters whose names would echo through the ages, names like Cerberus, the three-headed dog of the underworld, and the Lernaean Hydra, the serpent-like creature whose heads multiplied with each strike. These creatures were not merely beasts, they were the embodiment of chaos, destruction, and the unknown. Their stories would intertwine with the lives of heroes, gods, and mortals alike, and their very existence would test the limits of strength, bravery, and wisdom. And so, Typhon and Echidna, through their union, created some of the most fearsome beings the world would ever know. But their legacy didn't end there. These monsters would go on to shape the course of history and become a symbol of the ancient struggle between order and chaos, light and dark. Now, with the origins of these mighty creatures in mind, let us turn our attention to the beasts themselves, starting with those who arose from the loins of Typhon and Echidna. As we continue our journey through the world of Greek monsters, we now turn our attention to one of the most iconic and terrifying creatures of them all, Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guards the gates of the underworld. Imagine, if you will, a creature so massive that its mere presence strikes fear into the hearts of mortals and gods alike. Cerberus was no ordinary dog. He was the guardian of the realm of the dead, tasked with ensuring that no soul could escape from the afterlife, and no living being could enter uninvited. His appearance was as monstrous as his role. Cerberus had 3 fierce heads, each one snarling and growling, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. His body was that of a giant hound, his fur dark and matted, almost as if it were woven from shadows themselves. And around his neck, instead of a collar, were serpents, hissing and slithering, a sign of the danger that lurked in the underworld. But Cerberus was not just a mindless beast. He had a role to play, a purpose in the grand design of the world. He was the symbol of the boundary between the living and the dead, standing as the final protector between the world of the mortals and the afterlife that awaited them. No one could pass him without the permission of Hades, the god of the underworld. To understand Cerberus's role, we must remember the ancient Greek belief in the afterlife. The underworld was not a place of rest for the soul, but rather a dark, shadowy realm where spirits would wander forever. It was a place where those who had lived their mortal lives were judged and then confined. Cerberus, as its eternal guardian, made sure that no soul could escape and that no living being could enter without permission. But Cerberus's legend is not confined to the underworld alone. This monstrous creature played a significant role in one of the most famous tales of all Greek mythology, the 12 labors of Heracles. Heracles, the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmena, was a hero like no other. Known for his incredible strength and bravery, he had already completed many feats of strength, but his 12th and final labor would test him like never before. He was tasked with retrieving Cerberus from the underworld itself, a task that no mortal man had ever dared attempt. This labor was no simple feat. To reach Cerberus, Heracles would have to venture deep into the heart of the underworld, passing through realms filled with shadows, ghosts, and unspeakable horrors. He would face the wrath of Hades, god of the dead, who would not take kindly to a mortal trespassing in his domain. Yet, Heracles was undaunted. Armed with his wits and strength, he made his way to the gates of the underworld. Once he arrived, Cerberus confronted him, 3 heads snarling and snapping, a terrifying sight to behold. But Heracles, with the blessing of Hades, was allowed to approach the beast. He had no weapons, only his strength. With great determination and sheer power, Heracles was able to subdue Cerberus, overpowering the mighty creature. and dragging him from the depths of the underworld. This was no easy victory. The struggle was long and hard, and the very earth seemed to tremble beneath their struggle. Yet Heracles prevailed, bringing Cerberus to the surface as proof of his triumph. Once he had completed the labor, Heracles returned the beast to the underworld, where he resumed his post as the eternal guardian of the gates of the dead. Cerberus, as terrifying as he was, symbolized something much deeper in Greek mythology. He was the boundary between life and death, guarding the threshold that no one could cross without facing the judgment of the gods. In this way, he represents the natural order of life that, no matter how powerful or mighty one might be, all must eventually face their fate. So, Cerberus's role was not one of pure evil, but of balance. He ensured that the cycle of life and death remained intact, that the souls of the departed stayed where they belonged, and that the living could not trespass into the realm of the dead. As we move forward in our exploration of Greek monsters, remember that Cerberus, like many creatures in mythology, was not just a force of fear, but a vital part of the world's balance, a symbol of the eternal cycle that connects life, death, and everything in between. As we continue our exploration of the creatures born from the union of Typhon and Echidna, we come to another terrifying beast, Orthrus, the two-headed dog, twin of the mighty Cerberus. While Cerberus is perhaps the most famous of Typhon and Echidna's offspring, Orthrus is no less fearsome. But where Cerberus is known for guarding the gates of the underworld, Orthrus has a very different role, and one that brought him face to face with a hero who would become a legend. Imagine, if you will, a massive hound with two ferocious heads, each one snarling and snapping, its eyes gleaming with a cold, predatory hunger. Orthrus was a guardian, like Cerberus, but instead of guarding the gates to the underworld, Orthrus watched over something just as precious, the cattle of the monstrous Geryon. Geryon, another offspring of Echidna, was a three-bodied giant who ruled over a vast herd of red cattle. These cattle, prized and untouchable, were kept on the farthest reaches of the earth, in a distant land at the edge of the world. And Orthrus was their protector, the guardian of the herd, alongside his master, Geryon. Orthrus was not alone in his duties. He had a companion in his task, his brother, the mighty Cerberus, who kept watch over the dead. But Orthrus's charge was to protect something more worldly, a herd of cattle. Yet the danger and the power he wielded were no less fearsome. His two heads allowed him to keep a vigilant eye on every angle, ensuring that no intruders would dare steal from the great Geryon. But, like many of the creatures we encounter in Greek mythology, Orthrus would not remain undefeated for long. His fate would intertwine with the greatest hero of ancient Greece, Heracles. As part of his 12 labors, Heracles was tasked with retrieving the cattle of Geryon. This was no easy feat, as Geryon was a fearsome giant with 3 bodies and a mighty defense, but Heracles would not be deterred. To claim the cattle, he first had to face Orthrus, the guardian of the herd. The battle between Heracles and Orthrus was inevitable. Heracles, with his incredible strength and skill, had already overcome many obstacles, but Orthrus proved to be a fierce opponent. As Heracles approached Geryon's lands, Orthrus attacked, ready to defend his master's cattle with all the ferocity of a two-headed beast. But Heracles, unrelenting in his determination, was more than a match for Orthrus. The hero struck swiftly, defeating the beast with a single blow, or perhaps it was more than one, as Orthrus's twin heads would not give in so easily. In any case, the mighty hound fell before Heracles, who was able to claim the cattle and continue his journey. Yet, even in defeat, Orthrus symbolized something profound in Greek mythology. Just as Cerberus guards the threshold between life and death, Orthrus represents the guardianship of valuable treasures, the duties and responsibilities that come with power, and the struggle to protect what is precious. Orthrus, like his twin Cerberus, was a creature born from the chaotic union of Typhon and Echidna. And yet, despite their monstrous forms and fearsome powers, these siblings, Cerberus and Orthrus, show us an important theme in Greek mythology: the idea of monstrous siblings. These creatures, though terrifying, often had roles that were tied to the forces of nature or the protection of valuable things. They were not evil in their own right, but were, instead, guardians of boundaries. In this way, Orthrus is not simply a villain to be defeated. He is a symbol of loyalty and duty, just as Cerberus is. Both brothers served a higher purpose, one to guard the gates of death, the other to guard the treasures of the living. As we move forward in our exploration of Greek monsters, we are reminded of the balance between light and dark, order and chaos, even in the most terrifying creatures. The story of Orthrus is one that teaches us about duty, loyalty, and the inevitable clash between heroes and monsters. Now, with Orthrus's tale behind us, we turn our gaze back to the legacy of Typhon and Echidna's children, continuing our journey through the shadows of Greek mythology. As we move further into the world of Greek monsters, we encounter one of the most terrifying and relentless creatures, the Lernaean Hydra. This serpent-like beast, with its many heads and terrifying regenerative powers, is a symbol of both death and destruction. Picture, if you will, a creature whose form twists and coils like a serpent, but whose heads are numerous. Some say there were 9, others say more. Each of these heads glows with a venomous rage, their fangs dripping with poison. The Hydra's eyes burn with the heat of fury, and every movement it makes sends ripples of fear throughout the land. But the true terror of the Hydra was not just in its size or appearance. No, the most dreadful thing about this monster was its ability to regenerate a power so horrifying that it seemed impossible to defeat. You see, whenever one of the Hydra's heads was severed, 2 more would grow in its place. It was as if the more you tried to defeat the Hydra, the stronger it became. Imagine the helplessness that would wash over any hero who faced such a creature. Each strike against it seemed futile, only leading to more heads, more terror, and more danger. The Hydra resided in the swamps of Lerna, a place known for its dark and stagnant waters. It was here, in this haunted landscape, that Heracles would come face to face with one of his most difficult and dangerous tasks. Heracles, already a hero of great renown, was given the second of his 12 labors to slay the Lernaean Hydra. The task seemed impossible, a challenge that no mortal could hope to survive. But Heracles, undeterred by the difficulty, ventured into the swamps, knowing that to complete this labor, he would have to confront the Hydra and defeat it, or die trying. As Heracles approached the beast's lair, he saw the Hydra coiled among the murky waters, its many heads swaying ominously, waiting for him. With his mighty sword, Heracles struck the first head, slicing it off with one swift motion. But then, the horror began. 2 heads grew in place of the one he had severed, and when he struck again, another 2 heads replaced the one he had cut off. The Hydra was not only monstrous in its appearance, but in its defiance of nature itself. Every attack seemed to make it stronger, and Heracles quickly realized that this battle was unlike any he had faced before. But Heracles was no fool. He understood that brute strength alone would not win this fight. As he continued to strike at the heads, he called upon his friend Iolaus for assistance. Together, they devised a plan. As Heracles struck each head, Iolaus would burn the stump of the neck with a torch, preventing the heads from regenerating. Slowly, piece by piece, they managed to whittle down the Hydra's many heads. Finally, after an exhausting and perilous battle, Heracles struck the Hydra's immortal head, the one head that could not regenerate. With one final blow, he severed the immortal head and buried it under a massive rock, ensuring that it could never rise again. But even in its defeat, the Hydra left behind a legacy. Its venomous blood, which had flowed freely through the battle, was used by Heracles to dip his arrows. These arrows, coated with the deadly poison of the Hydra, would prove to be crucial in future tasks, further solidifying the Hydra's role as one of the most dangerous creatures in Greek mythology. The Lernaean Hydra, in its many forms, represents something deeply symbolic in Greek mythology, the concept of evil and chaos that cannot be easily defeated. The Hydra's regenerative ability mirrors the idea that evil, once defeated, can rise again, becoming stronger and more dangerous than before. This was a lesson Heracles would learn in his battle with the Hydra. Some forces cannot be vanquished with sheer force alone, but require cunning, strategy, and collaboration. In a broader sense, the Hydra embodies the eternal struggle against darkness, a force that is ever present in the world and always threatens to return. In Greek mythology, monsters like the Hydra are often reflections of real-world struggles, the fight against inner demons, the persistence of evil, and the need for wisdom in overcoming adversity. As we reflect on the Hydra's tale, we are reminded that sometimes the greatest challenges in life are not defeated through strength alone, but through perseverance, strategy, and the wisdom to know when to call upon help. With the Hydra now behind us, let us continue our journey through the realm of myth, where more creatures, more challenges, and more legends await. We continue our journey through the dark and twisted world of Greek mythology. We encounter one of the most fearsome and chaotic creatures to ever walk the earth, the Chimera. A being of fire and destruction, this monstrous creature is a symbol of nature's untamable fury, a fusion of several beasts that together create a force of terrifying might. Imagine, if you will, a creature unlike any you've ever seen. At the front of this creature is the head of a lion, the king of all beasts, its mane flowing like a golden fire, its eyes gleaming with an unyielding hunger. But that's not all. From its body emerges a second head, that of a goat, its eyes wide and wild, its mouth foaming with madness. The creature's body is that of a lion, powerful and muscular, and yet a tail snakes out from its hindquarters, not the usual tail of a lion, but that of a serpent, its scales glistening and its fangs ready to strike. And, to make matters worse, Chimera was no passive beast. This abomination could breathe fire, a blazing, scorching flame that could turn forests into ashes and cities into smoldering ruins. It was a creature born of destruction, a force of nature that could not be tamed, nor could it be reasoned with. The Chimera was a symbol of chaos, of the primal forces that could sweep through the world, leaving devastation in their wake. The Chimera was a creature that embodied the power of nature's worst forces. She was a product of Typhon and Echidna, as we have seen with so many of their monstrous offspring. Her very being was a combination of several terrifying creatures, a lion, a goat, and a serpent, each of which represented different aspects of nature's untamed, destructive side. And so, as one might imagine, the Chimera was an unstoppable force, wreaking havoc wherever she went. Her flames scorched the lands of Lycia, a region in Asia Minor, where she terrorized the inhabitants. Villages were reduced to ash, crops were burned, and no hero or warrior dared approach the beast. Her wrath was a reflection of the natural chaos that could occur without warning or reason. Like a storm, the Chimera could appear without warning, burning everything in her path, leaving no mercy for those who stood before her. But as with all great stories in Greek mythology, it is only through the strength of a hero that such a monster would meet its end. Enter Bellerophon, a hero of great renown, known for his strength, courage, and his incredible skill with horses. Bellerophon was the son of the mortal Eurynome and the god Poseidon, and he was no stranger to the world of monsters. But when he learned of the Chimera's rampage, he knew he would have to face the beast for the sake of his people and his honor. Bellerophon's task was not one to be taken lightly. How could a single hero, no matter how mighty, defeat such a creature? The Chimera was more than just a lion with a serpent's tail. It was a force of nature itself, and its flames could turn a warrior's weapon into ash. But Bellerophon was not without help. He had the mighty Pegasus, the winged horse born from the blood of Medusa, by his side. With Pegasus as his steed, Bellerophon soared through the skies, prepared to face the Chimera from above. He knew that the only way to defeat the beast was to avoid its fire and strike from a distance. The Chimera, for all its power and fury, was a creature bound to the earth. She could breathe fire, but she could not fly. The battle between Bellerophon and the Chimera was as dramatic and fierce as one might imagine. The hero, riding high on Pegasus, flew in swift circles above the beast. The Chimera, with her lion's head roaring in rage, lashed out at the sky, but Bellerophon was quick and evasive. He waited for the right moment, and when the Chimera opened her mouth to unleash another torrent of flame, Bellerophon struck with his spear, plunging it deep into the creature's heart. The Chimera's death was not an easy victory, nor was it the end of the story. For the Chimera, like many of the monsters of Greek mythology, was a symbol of something much greater than itself. She was a representation of the chaotic, destructive forces of nature, the storms, the fires, the dangers that lurk in the wilds, unrelenting and untamable. But in Bellerophon's triumph, we see that even the most overwhelming forces can be overcome with skill, bravery, and a bit of divine assistance. And yet, even as the Chimera was slain, she left behind a legacy. She was a reminder of the ancient struggle between order and chaos, and of the ongoing battle that all heroes must face to tame the forces of nature and bring balance to a world that constantly threatens to spiral out of control. But there is another, deeper layer to the story of the Chimera, one that reflects the relationship between humanity and the natural world. The Chimera, as a creature born of chaos, was a reminder of the unpredictable and uncontrollable aspects of nature, those forces that cannot be tamed, those dangers that cannot be avoided. In the Greek myth, Bellerophon's defeat of the Chimera symbolizes mankind's constant struggle against these forces. Yet it also serves as a reminder that no matter how powerful humans may become, nature will always find a way to test them, to remind them of their place in the world. The Chimera's defeat may have brought peace to Lycia for a time, but her legacy, the symbol of untamed power and destruction, would continue to resonate throughout Greek mythology. Even as the story of the Chimera comes to a close, the lesson of the battle remains. And so, as we move forward in our exploration of Greek monsters, we are reminded that, no matter how heroic the victory, the forces of nature are always waiting in the shadows, ready to strike again. The Chimera, like all monsters in mythology, is a force of nature that cannot be easily defeated. And yet, it is through the struggle against such creatures that we see the true strength of the heroes who face them. In the world of Greek mythology, there are few creatures more feared and more respected than the Nemean lion. With its golden fur that shone like the sun, and a strength unmatched by any beast, this lion was no ordinary predator. It was a creature of mythic proportions, its power as legendary as its near invincibility. Imagine, if you will, a lion so fierce that its very presence sent shivers down the spines of all who encountered it. Its body was massive, its claws sharp and deadly, and its eyes burned with the fire of raw, untamed fury. But it was the lion's skin that truly made it legendary, a hide so tough, so impenetrable, that no weapon could pierce it. It was said that not even the mightiest sword or spear could leave a mark on its hide. The Nemean lion roamed the region of Nemea, a lush and fertile land where no man or beast dared to tread for fear of its wrath. The lion hunted with ease, killing all who crossed its path. The people of Nemea lived in constant terror of the beast, for no hero had been able to defeat it. It was a terror of nature, a symbol of pure strength and invulnerability. But even in the face of such a terrifying creature, there would come a hero, a man whose name would echo throughout history. That hero was Heracles, the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmena. Known for his incredible strength and courage, Heracles had already proven himself a warrior like no other. Yet, the king of Mycenae, Eurystheus, would soon task him with a challenge that would test even his legendary abilities. The 12 labors of Heracles, a series of impossible tasks that would define his legacy, began with a challenge that seemed insurmountable: the slaying of the Nemean lion. This would be the first of Heracles' labors, and it would set the stage for all the trials that would follow. At first, the task appeared simple enough for a hero of Heracles' caliber. But as soon as Heracles approached the lion's lair, he quickly realized the true nature of his challenge. The Nemean lion, with its golden fur and piercing eyes, was a creature unlike any other. No weapon could harm it. No force of nature could break its skin. Heracles, ever the problem solver, knew that brute strength alone would not be enough to defeat such a creature. He attempted to strike at the lion with his bow and arrows, but the arrows simply bounced off the lion's thick hide. Next, he tried his sword, but again, it had no effect. The Nemean lion was, as its name suggested, impervious to harm. But Heracles was not one to give up easily. He needed to think outside of the box. Realizing that no weapon would suffice, he decided to rely on his sheer strength and ingenuity. In a daring move, Heracles decided to wrestle the lion with his bare hands. The battle that ensued was nothing short of legendary. The Nemean lion, with its powerful claws and razor-sharp teeth, lashed out at Heracles, but the hero was undeterred. He fought with all his might, using his strength to grip the lion and hold it in place. The lion roared and struggled, but Heracles refused to let go. It was a contest of raw power, a struggle between the forces of nature and the might of a mortal hero. After what seemed like an eternity, Heracles was able to pin the lion down. With a burst of incredible strength, he grabbed the lion's head and, using his immense power, snapped its neck, finally bringing the beast to the ground. But even in its defeat, the Nemean lion had one final trick to play. Heracles, knowing that he had conquered the lion, turned to skin the creature. Yet, even this task proved to be nearly impossible. The lion's hide was so tough that no blade could cut through it. Once again, Heracles relied on his strength, using the lion's own claws to skin it. The result was a cloak of invulnerability, a symbol of his victory. Heracles wore the Nemean lion's pelt as armor, a sign of his triumph over the most fearsome creature in the land. From that moment on, the lion's hide became one of the most iconic symbols in Greek mythology, a reminder of Heracles' strength and resilience, and of the power that could be gained through sheer determination and ingenuity. The Nemean lion was more than just a creature to be defeated. It was a symbol of invincibility, of the untamable forces of nature that could seem impossible to overcome. But Heracles' victory showed that even against the strongest forces, with enough courage, strength, and cleverness, Even the most seemingly invulnerable creature could be brought to its knees. The lion's symbolism in Greek mythology is clear. It represents the challenges that are beyond human control, the forces of nature that seem unbeatable. And yet, it also represents the idea that no matter how invincible something may seem, there is always a way to overcome it. Heracles' victory over the Nemean lion is a testament to the hero's perseverance and to the eternal struggle of humankind against the raw, untamed forces of nature. Moreover, the Nemean lion serves as a reminder that even the greatest of heroes must confront their own limitations. For all of his strength and skill, Heracles needed to think outside of the box, to use his wits as much as his might to win. It was not just physical power that brought the lion down, but a combination of both strength and intelligence. Heracles' victory over the Nemean lion was the beginning of his long journey through the 12 labors, a journey that would take him to the very edges of the known world and bring him face to face with countless monsters and impossible tasks. But the Nemean lion would always be remembered as the first challenge, the one that set the stage for everything that was to come. And in the end, the lion's hide, a cloak of invulnerability, became a symbol not only of Heracles' victory, but of the hero's ability to overcome the impossible. It was a reminder that strength, while important, is not always enough. It is through cleverness, perseverance, and a willingness to fight against even the most insurmountable odds that true heroes are made. In the shadowy corners of Greek mythology, few figures are as tragic and as terrifying as Medusa. A name that is synonymous with terror, Medusa is one of the most famous figures in all of myth. Her story is not just one of monstrous transformation, but also a tale of beauty, jealousy, and vengeance. A tale of a woman who was both a victim and a monster. Picture, if you will, a woman of exceptional beauty. Medusa was once a mortal, and her beauty was so striking that it caught the eye of none other than Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea. It is said that Poseidon, unable to resist her allure, took her to the temple of Athena, where he violated her. This act, cruel in its own right, would be the catalyst for a transformation that would forever change Medusa's fate. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, was enraged by what had happened to Medusa. But it wasn't just her anger that drove the next part of Medusa's transformation. In a cruel twist of fate, Athena blamed Medusa for the desecration of her temple rather than the god who had assaulted her. In her rage, Athena cursed Medusa, transforming her from a beautiful woman into a horrific creature. Medusa's once flowing hair, the envy of all who saw it, was turned into a mass of writhing serpents. Her beautiful face was twisted into a grotesque mask of fear and hatred, but it was her gaze, her eyes, that would become the most terrifying part of her. Anyone who looked directly into her eyes would turn to stone, frozen in place, forever trapped in her gaze. Medusa's transformation was not just a punishment. It was a curse that forced her to live as a monster, alone in a dark cave at the edge of the world. She was no longer a mortal woman, but one of the Gorgons, the three sisters who were feared and shunned by all. Her sisters, Steno and Euryale, were similarly monstrous, but none were as infamous as Medusa. While her sisters remained immortal and continued to terrorize the world, Medusa, the mortal one, was doomed to suffer for eternity. Yet, despite her monstrous appearance, there is a tragic element to Medusa's story. She was not born a monster, nor did she choose to become one. She was a victim, cursed and abandoned by the gods. Her beauty turned into a weapon of fear. Her transformation was the ultimate symbol of how beauty could be warped into something horrific, how innocence could be shattered by the cruelty of the god. But as with many Greek myths, The story of Medusa is also intertwined with the tale of a hero. Perseus, the son of Zeus and Danae, was tasked with a dangerous mission to slay Medusa and bring back her head as one of his famous 12 labors. This quest would not be easy, for Medusa's gaze could turn even the bravest of men to stone. Yet, Perseus was determined. Armed with the guidance of the gods, he set out on his perilous journey to confront the Gorgon. Perseus, guided by Athena and Hermes, was provided with several magical items to help him on his quest. Athena gave him a polished shield, which would allow him to view Medusa's reflection without looking directly at her. Hermes provided him with winged sandals to carry him swiftly through the air, and Hades gave him an invisibility helmet, which would allow him to approach Medusa undetected. When Perseus arrived at the lair of Medusa, he found her and her 2 sisters in their cave, where they had been hiding from the world. As Medusa slept, Perseus, using the reflection in his shield, cautiously approached her. He was careful not to look directly at her, for he knew the danger of her gaze. With one swift strike, Perseus severed Medusa's head, holding it aloft as a symbol of his victory. But the story did not end with Medusa's death. From her blood sprang 2 creatures, the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor. These beings were born from the very blood of Medusa, a testament to her tragic legacy. Pegasus, the great steed of heroes, would go on to serve Perseus and other heroes in their quests. Medusa's death, though a triumph for Perseus, was also the final chapter in her tragic story. She had once been a woman of beauty, cursed by the gods, and turned into a symbol of monstrous terror. Yet, even in her death, she gave birth to creatures of great significance in Greek mythology. Her blood, which had been the source of her curse, became the source of new life. There is a deep symbolism in the story of Medusa. Her transformation from a beautiful woman to a terrifying monster represents the way in which beauty and innocence can be corrupted by the harshness of the world. Her curse is a reflection of the ancient Greek belief in the power of the gods to shape the destinies of mortals, often in cruel and unjust ways. Medusa's tale is a reminder of the fragility of beauty and the ease with which it can be turned into something monstrous. Medusa also represents the dangers of unchecked power. Her gaze, which could turn men to stone, was a symbol of the power that beauty and wrath could wield. Yet her power was not one of choice. It was imposed upon her by the gods, turning her into a figure of fear and sorrow rather than one of grace. The story of Medusa is one that resonates with themes of beauty, vengeance, and the cruel fate of those who are at the mercy of the gods. She was a woman punished for a crime she did not commit, transformed into a monster and feared by all. Yet, even in her monstrous form, Medusa retained a certain tragic nobility. She was a victim of divine justice, a reminder that even gods can be cruel, and that innocence is not always protected. Her legacy, however, lives on. Medusa's head, severed by Perseus, would be used as a powerful weapon in many myths. It was said that the sight of her severed head could still turn enemies to stone, and it became a symbol of both strength and terror. Even after her death, Medusa's power continued to shape the world of Greek mythology, becoming an object of fear, admiration, and respect. In the end, Medusa's story is not just one of horror, but also of tragedy and transformation. She was not merely a monster. She was a woman who had been wronged by the gods, turned into a creature of vengeance and rage. Her story reminds us of the power of beauty, the dangers of unchecked wrath, and the cruelty that sometimes shapes the destinies of the innocent. In the world of Greek mythology, few creatures were as feared and as legendary as the Gorgons. These terrifying sisters, with their serpentine hair and stone-cold gazes, were creatures of both fear and fascination. While Medusa is the most famous of the three, her sisters, Steno and Uriel, played an equally important role in the world of myth, not only as monstrous figures, but as part of a family bound by their shared curse. The Gorgons were the daughters of the ancient sea deities, Phorcys and Ceto, beings of the deep who were themselves creatures of terror. While Medusa was mortal, Steno and Euryale were immortal, and this distinction would shape their stories and their legacy in ways that differed from their sister's tragic tale. Medusa, as we've seen, was transformed into a monster by Athena as punishment. Her beauty turned into a weapon of fear. But Steno and Euryale, unlike their sister, were born into this monstrous existence. From the moment they came into the world, they were creatures of darkness, immortal, hideous, and terrifying to behold. Let's begin with Steno, the eldest of the three sisters. Known for her violent nature and her insatiable bloodlust, Steno was a figure whose very presence instilled dread in those who encountered her. While Medusa was cursed by the gods for her beauty, Steno's monstrous traits were part of her from the beginning. Her eyes, like those of her sisters, could turn anyone who gazed into them to stone. But her nature was far more aggressive. Steno was the fiercest and most deadly of the Gorgons, with a reputation for being merciless. She was often depicted as a frightening figure, her hair a writhing mass of snakes, her face contorted in a permanent expression of rage. Unlike Medusa, Steno never had a chance at redemption or transformation. She was born into her monstrous form and remained a symbol of unyielding violence and terror throughout her immortal existence. While Medusa's story is one of tragedy and transformation, Steno's was one of pure, unrelenting rage. Then there is Euryale, the second sister, whose story is often overshadowed by Medusa's tragic fate. Euryale was also immortal, but unlike her sisters, she was not as vicious or as fearsome in her temperament. She was known for her loud, unsettling laughter and her deep, echoing voice, which struck terror into the hearts of those who heard it. Uriel, like her sisters, had snakes for hair and a gaze that could turn men to stone, but her role in Greek mythology was often more passive. Although Euryale was immortal, she did not play an active role in many of the myths. Unlike Medusa, who was slain by Perseus, or Steno, whose rage was legendary, she was often portrayed as a silent witness to the battles of her sisters. Yet she remained an integral part of the Gorgon family, bound by the same curse and the same monstrous traits that defined them all. The Gorgons, as sisters, represented the complex relationship between family and fate in Greek mythology. While each of them had a unique role to play, they were bound together by their shared heritage and their inheritance of monstrous traits. The connection between them was not one of simple sibling rivalry or love, but of shared suffering and curse. Unlike the heroes of Greek myth, who were often marked by their heroic deeds and eventual triumphs, the Gorgons were marked by their monstrous natures and the inescapable curse of their birth. What's most interesting about the Gorgons is how they embody the theme of inheritance in mythology. Just as Heracles inherited his strength and his divine parentage from Zeus, the Gorgons inherited their monstrous forms from their parents, Phorcys and Ceto. This inheritance is not a gift, but a curse, one that shapes their existence and determines their fate. The Gorgons' shared curse was not just about appearance, it was about their very nature. The terrifying eyes that turned men to stone, the snakes that replaced their hair. These features were not just physical traits. They were representations of the uncontrollable forces of chaos and destruction that the Gorgons embodied. As daughters of Phorcys and Ceto, creatures of the deep, the Gorgons were linked to the most primal forces of the sea and the unknown, and their monstrous traits reflected this connection. In Greek mythology, family is often a source of both strength and tragedy. The Gorgons' relationship to one another was shaped by their shared nature and, ultimately, by the curse that bound them to their monstrous forms. Unlike other families in myth, such as the gods of Olympus, whose relationships were often defined by rivalry and power struggles, the Gorgons' family dynamic was one of isolation and fear. Their role in Greek mythology was also a reflection of the themes of fate and the uncontrollable forces of nature. Unlike heroes who could overcome challenges and change their destinies, the Gorgons were trapped in a cycle of terror, unable to break free from the curse of their existence. Even though they were immortal, they were isolated and feared by all. This isolation was not just a physical separation from the world, but also a symbol of the emotional and psychological isolation that came with being cursed by the gods. The Gorgons, in their totality, represent the darker side of family inheritance in Greek mythology. While many heroes are celebrated for the traits they inherit, the Gorgons' inheritance was a curse that they could never escape. Their role in the mythological world was to serve as a reminder of the destructive power of the gods, of how fate could twist and warp the lives of even the most innocent beings. In the end, while Medusa's tale is one of tragedy and transformation, and Sthenel's is one of rage and terror, Euryale remains a quiet figure in the background, a reminder that not all who are cursed are destined for greatness or even for a heroic death. Some, like Euryale, are simply swept along by the currents of fate, destined to remain in the shadows of their sisters' more famous tales. The Gorgon story, then, is not just about monstrous appearances or terrifying powers. It is a story of family, inheritance, and the inescapable consequences of being born into a world where the gods hold the ultimate power over your fate. The Gorgons represent the darker side of nature, the forces that cannot be controlled, and the way in which family bonds can be both a source of power and a source of great suffering. In the heart of ancient Crete, deep within the labyrinth built by the master craftsman Daedalus, there was a creature so terrifying, so monstrous, that its very name became synonymous with chaos and confusion. This creature, the Minotaur, was no mere beast. It was a tragic figure, born of both human and animal, trapped forever in the maze, cursed by its own existence. Imagine, if you will, a creature whose body is that of a man, but whose head is that of a bull, a beast of immense strength and rage, a being trapped between two worlds, neither fully human nor fully animal. The Minotaur was a terrifying sight. Its massive horns, its bellowing roar, and its insatiable hunger for human flesh made it a creature of nightmares. The story of the Minotaur begins with King Minos of Crete, a ruler whose power and pride were unmatched. Minos had received a sign from the gods, a magnificent white bull as a symbol of his reign. However, when Minos refused to sacrifice the bull to Poseidon as he had promised, the god grew angry. In retaliation, Poseidon cursed Minos' wife, Pasiphae, with an overwhelming and unnatural lust for the bull. To satisfy this curse, Pasiphae sought the help of Daedalus, the great inventor, who fashioned for her a wooden cow. Inside this contraption, Pasiphae was able to mate with the bull, and from this union, the Minotaur was born a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, a creature that would haunt the land of Crete for generations. But the Minotaur was not simply a beast of brute strength. It was a creature born of the gods' punishment, a symbol of the chaos and turmoil that can arise when humans attempt to defy the will of the gods. Its very existence was a reflection of the consequences of pride and hubris. Minos, unable to control the monster, ordered Daedalus to build the labyrinth, an intricate maze of twisting corridors and dead ends, to house the creature, keeping it hidden from the world. For years, the Minotaur was kept locked away in the labyrinth, its hunger growing ever more insatiable. It was a creature of darkness, a being of pure animalistic instinct, whose very existence was a trap. It was doomed to wander the maze, never finding its way out, just as those who were sent to the labyrinth as sacrifices would meet their grisly end at the hands of the beast. The Minotaur's role in Greek mythology is not just that of a terrifying monster, but a symbol of the darkness that resides within all of us. It represents the inner conflicts, the struggles between reason and desire, between the human and the animal, that every person faces. The labyrinth itself, as a symbol of confusion and entrapment, is a metaphor for the struggles we all face in navigating the complex and often confusing maze of life. The Minotaur's true significance in Greek mythology lies not just in its terrifying form, but in its connection to the hero Theseus, who would face the creature in a legendary battle. Theseus, the son of Aegeus, king of Athens, was a young hero who had already proved his strength and courage by overcoming many challenges. But when the people of Athens were forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women as tributes to Minos every 9 years to be sacrificed to the Minotaur, Theseus vowed to put an end to the cycle of fear and death. Theseus, determined to rid Athens of the Minotaur, set sail for Crete. Upon his arrival, he met with King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, who had fallen in love with him. Ariadne, knowing the fate of those who had entered the labyrinth before him, gave Theseus a ball of thread, the famous thread of Ariadne, and instructed him to tie one end of it at the entrance of the labyrinth and unravel it as he made his way deeper into the maze. This would allow him to find his way back once he had slain the Minotaur. Armed with the thread and his great courage, Theseus entered the labyrinth, determined to face the beast that had terrorized his people for so long. As he ventured deeper into the maze, the sounds of the Minotaur's growls echoed through the corridors, reminding him of the terrifying challenge that lay ahead. Finally, Theseus encountered the Minotaur, whose massive form loomed before him in the shadows. The Minotaur charged at Theseus with an animalistic fury, but Theseus, using his agility and strength, managed to dodge the creature's attacks. With one mighty blow, Theseus struck the Minotaur, killing it and ending the terror that had haunted the land of Crete for so long. The death of the Minotaur marked a great victory for Theseus and for Athens, which no longer had to send its people to the labyrinth as sacrifices. But the Minotaur's death was also the end of a tragic cycle, a cycle of suffering that had been set in motion by the gods and sealed by the pride of a king. The Minotaur, in many ways, was the product of human pride, of defiance against the will of the gods, and of the consequences that followed. In a deeper sense, the Minotaur also symbolizes the internal battles that each of us faces. The labyrinth, the endless twisting corridors and dead ends, is a metaphor for the confusion and uncertainty that often accompany our greatest challenges. The Minotaur itself, with its dual nature as both man and beast, represents the struggle between our higher, rational selves and our primal, animalistic urges. It is a conflict that we all must confront in our own lives. Theseus's journey into the labyrinth and his eventual triumph over the Minotaur symbolize the hero's journey, the confrontation with the darkness within, and the ability to overcome it. The thread of Ariadne, which guided Theseus back out of the labyrinth, represents the guidance that we often need in times of confusion and fear. It is a symbol of hope, of the light that can lead us through the darkness of our own inner struggles. In this way, the Minotaur is not merely a monster to be slain, It is a symbol of the obstacles that we must overcome in our own lives, the monsters that lurk within us and threaten to consume us. Theseus's victory represents the triumph of reason and courage over chaos and primal fear. In the end, the Minotaur story is one of both terror and triumph, of darkness and light. It is a reminder that even in the face of our greatest fears, we have the ability to confront them, to find the courage to navigate the labyrinth of our own lives, and to emerge victorious. Deep within the swirling waters of the Strait of Messina, where the seas clash between Italy and Sicily, there lived a monster so fearsome that her very name sent shivers down the spines of sailors. This was Scylla, a creature of the sea whose monstrous form, with its multiple heads and ravenous hunger, was the ultimate terror for any who dared venture too close to her lair. Picture, if you will, a creature with 12 legs and 6 heads, each one sprouting from a hideous body, their mouths gaping wide with rows of sharp teeth, ready to devour anything that came within reach. Her eyes were fierce, her jaws unrelenting, and from the depths of the water, she could reach out and snatch passing ships, dragging sailors to their doom. Scylla's terror was not just in her appearance, but in her very nature. She was a creature born from the chaotic and unpredictable forces of nature. There is no consensus in myth as to how Scylla came to be. Some say she was once a beautiful sea nymph who was transformed into a monster by the gods, while others suggest she was always a creature of the deep, a force of nature that had been shaped by the wild and untamable sea. But the most well-known and tragic story of Scylla is her encounter with Odysseus, the great hero of Homer's epic, the Odyssey. In the tale, Odysseus and his men are on their long journey home from the Trojan War, trying to navigate the treacherous seas and return to Ithaca. Their voyage is filled with obstacles, and they must pass through the Strait of Messina, where Scylla and her counterpart, Charybdis, a deadly whirlpool, lie in wait. Odysseus is warned by the sorceress Circe about the danger of Scylla and Charybdis. She tells him that as they pass through the strait, they will have to choose between the two dangers, the devouring jaws of Scylla or the raging whirlpool of Charybdis. Circe advises Odysseus that while they will inevitably lose some men to Scylla, it is far better than facing Charybdis, which could destroy the entire ship. With this in mind, Odysseus and his men sail towards the strait, knowing that they will soon face the monstrous Scylla. As they approach her lair, Odysseus takes all necessary precautions, ordering his men to row quickly and avoid the monster's reach. But Scylla, ever hungry, is ready and waiting. Her 6 heads emerge from the water, and with lightning speed, she snatches up 6 of Odysseus's men, devouring them as they helplessly scream for their lives. The encounter with Scylla is one of the most tragic and unavoidable moments in Odysseus's journey. Despite his cunning and bravery, Odysseus is powerless to stop the monster. The loss of his men is a painful reminder that even the greatest heroes cannot escape the forces of fate that govern the world. Scylla, as a creature of nature, embodies the unpredictability of the world. Odysseus navigates a world where survival often depends not on strength or intellect, but on luck and the whims of forces beyond human control. Yet, Scylla is more than just a monster in this myth. She is a representation of the duality of nature, the constant struggle between opposing forces. She is not merely evil, but a manifestation of the uncontrollable power of the sea. As Odysseus's journey progresses, the choices he must make between Scylla and Charybdis, between the lesser evil and the greater, reflect the harshness and unpredictability of fate itself. The myth of Scylla embodies a theme that runs throughout Greek mythology: the idea that fate is an uncontrollable force that cannot be avoided or predicted. For Odysseus, The choice to sail through the strait was a calculated one, but it was still a choice between two evils. In Greek mythology, the gods and monsters often represent the forces of nature that are beyond human understanding, and Scylla is no exception. She symbolizes the wild, uncontrollable aspects of the natural world, the things that lie beyond human influence and reason. The confrontation with Scylla is also a lesson in the nature of heroism and leadership. Odysseus, as a leader, is forced to make difficult decisions that result in loss and sacrifice. While he cannot prevent the death of his men, he can at least minimize the damage by choosing the less catastrophic path. This decision, however, does not come without its emotional toll. Odysseus' struggle is not just against the physical monsters he faces, but also against the burden of leadership, the weight of knowing that some sacrifices are unavoidable in the quest for survival. Scylla's role in Greek mythology is significant not only because she is a terrifying monster, but because she reflects the theme of inevitability and the complexity of human decisions in the face of danger. The monsters that Odysseus encounters, whether it be Scylla, Charybdis, or the Cyclops, are all representations of forces beyond his control, and they highlight the central conflict of the Odyssey, the struggle to return home, to navigate the unknown, and to survive the whims of gods and monsters. In a broader sense, Scylla symbolizes the unpredictability of fate itself. The sea, like life, is ever-changing, full of dangers that cannot always be avoided or understood. Scylla and Charybdis are not merely external threats, but metaphors for the moral and existential dilemmas we all face in life. The sea is a constant reminder of how much of our existence is governed by forces beyond our control, and Scylla represents the random, often destructive consequences that arise from this uncontrollable force. Moreover, Scylla's relationship with Charybdis, two seemingly opposing forces, embodies the duality of nature. While Scylla is a beast of destruction, Charybdis is a force of chaos. Together, they represent the balance of destruction and creation, of life and death, and the inescapable tension between opposing forces that shape the world of the gods and men alike. In the end, Scylla's story is not just one of terror, but a symbol of the unpredictable, uncontrollable forces of nature that challenge us in life. She is a creature born from the chaos of the sea, a being whose very nature defies logic and reason. But she is also a reminder that, in the face of these forces, we must make difficult choices and face the consequences of those choices, no matter how painful they may be. In the treacherous waters of the Strait of Messina, where the forces of nature collide and churn, there lies a terror so immense that it rivals the monstrous Scylla. This terror, however, is not a creature with sharp teeth or numerous heads. Instead, it is a force of nature, a giant whirlpool known as Charybdis, that has the power to devour entire ships and their crews with a single thunderous pull. Imagine, if you will, the vastness of the sea stretching out before you, endless and unpredictable. But just ahead, where the sea narrows between Sicily and the Italian mainland, there is a hidden danger, a swirling vortex of water that can drag ships to the deepest depths in an instant. Charybdis is no mere storm or turbulent tide. It is an insatiable force of nature, an abyss that swallows everything in its path. Charybdis was once a sea nymph, a daughter of Poseidon and Gaia, according to some myths. In her original form, she was a gentle being who lived in the waters, but she was transformed into a monstrous whirlpool as a punishment from Zeus. In some versions of the myth, it is said that Charybdis had been stealing the water from the seas to increase her father's domain, and in retaliation, Zeus turned her into a giant, destructive whirlpool. Her transformation into Charybdis was a reflection of the chaos and uncontrollable nature of the sea. Whereas Scylla, her counterpart, was a creature of pure violence and hunger. Charybdis represented the uncontrollable forces of nature that could erase everything in their path without warning. She symbolized the power of the sea to destroy, to swallow, and to leave no trace behind. In the Odyssey, Charybdis plays a crucial role in Odysseus's journey home. As he and his men approach the dangerous Strait of Messina, they must navigate the waters between Scylla, the multi-headed beast, and Charybdis, the deadly whirlpool. These two forces, one a terrifying monster and the other a natural catastrophe, present Odysseus with an impossible choice, one that will test his leadership and his ability to make decisions under duress. Odysseus is warned by the sorceress Circe, who advises him that they must sail close to Scylla, the monster, because while they will lose some men to her hunger, it is far better than facing Charybdis, whose whirlpool could pull the entire ship and crew into the depths of the sea. With this knowledge, Odysseus decides to take the course that will lead him close to Scylla, knowing that the danger of Charybdis is far greater. As they approach the strait, Odysseus's men are filled with dread, knowing the danger that lies ahead. The terrifying roar of Charybdis fills the air, and the whirlpool begins to churn violently, its power threatening to swallow the entire ship. The crew rows as fast as they can, but Charybdis' pull is relentless. As the ship sails too close to the deadly whirlpool, it seems as though the crew is doomed. But despite the overwhelming danger, Odysseus's leadership and his earlier decision to sail close to Scylla saved the ship from complete destruction. He steers the ship away from the worst of the pull, narrowly avoiding Charybdis's deadly grasp. Yet, the peril of the situation remains a reminder of the ever-present dangers that lurk within the sea, where fate is often determined by the whims of nature and the gods. Charybdis, like Scylla, represents the duality of nature, the forces that are both necessary and destructive. The sea, like life itself, is a source of sustenance, but it is also a place of peril, where survival is never guaranteed. Charybdis is not a personal enemy to Odysseus, but a force that represents the randomness of fate, the uncontrollable nature of the universe. There is no battle to be won with Charybdis. It is an elemental force that must be avoided, a reminder that some dangers cannot be fought, only navigated. Charybdis also embodies the idea of choice in the face of overwhelming danger. Odysseus, when faced with the decision to pass through the strait, must choose between two deadly options. Both Scylla and Charybdis represent death, but Scylla offers a chance that not all of his men will perish. Charybdis, on the other hand, offers no such hope. In the end, the encounter with Charybdis is a lesson in the unpredictability of fate and the need for wisdom in the face of unavoidable danger. The myth of Charybdis, like many Greek myths, teaches us about the forces of nature that are beyond human control. Charybdis represents the dangers that we cannot fight against, the forces that we must navigate carefully and wisely, while Scylla's menace is one that can be confronted with courage and strength. Charybdis is a reminder that not all battles can be won. Some forces, like fate itself, are too powerful to be defeated. In a larger sense, Charybdis symbolizes the tension between destruction and survival. The whirlpool represents the inevitable pull of death and chaos, a force that is always waiting, always threatening to consume everything in its path. But the fact that Odysseus survives narrowly escaping the grasp of Charybdis is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the need for careful navigation through life's challenges. In Greek mythology, Charybdis serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of fate. She is a force that cannot be controlled or tamed, much like the natural world itself. Yet, she is not purely evil. She is simply a part of the chaotic order of nature. Her role in the Odyssey is to remind us that even the greatest heroes must face forces beyond their understanding, and that survival often depends not on strength or courage, but on wisdom, timing, and the ability to avoid the most destructive elements of the world. The encounter with Charybdis, like many aspects of Greek mythology, is a reminder that life is full of dangers. Some we can confront, others we must simply endure. Charybdis embodies the uncontrollable, the inevitable, and the sometimes merciless nature of fate. And it is through the careful navigation of life's whirlpools that we learn the true meaning of survival. In the ancient world, the Sphinx was a creature of both beauty and terror. Her body, that of a lion, and her head, that of a woman, created an image of both grace and power, a beast that exuded mystery and menace. The Sphinx's riddle was famous, and those who dared to approach her were met with an intellectual challenge that only the wisest could solve. But for those who failed, there was no mercy, only death. The Sphinx, as described in Greek mythology, was a creature who terrorized the city of Thebes, sitting upon a rock on the road that led into the city. Anyone who wished to pass by her lair was forced to answer a riddle. If they answered incorrectly, the Sphinx would pounce, devouring them in an instant. The people of Thebes were desperate. For years, the Sphinx had claimed the lives of many, and no one had been able to defeat her. The city was in despair, its roads filled with corpses, its people frozen in fear. The riddle that the Sphinx posed was not one of trivial knowledge, but a question that tested the very essence of human existence and wisdom. She would ask, "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening?" It was a question so deceptively simple that many tried and failed to answer it, each one falling to the Sphinx's deadly claws. Yet, the answer to her riddle was a profound reflection on life itself, one that only the wisest could comprehend. The riddle symbolized the journey of life, with its stages of childhood, adulthood, and old age. The answer was man, who crawls on all 4s as a child, walks on 2 legs as an adult, and uses a cane in old age, walking on 3 legs. This riddle encapsulated the fleeting nature of life, the inevitable march of time, and the wisdom that comes with understanding one's place in the cycle of existence. However, it wasn't just the riddle that made the Sphinx so deadly. It was the fact that she was a force of fate, a gatekeeper between life and death. Those who answered wrongly were not just defeated by their lack of intellect, but by the inevitability of fate itself. The Sphinx was an embodiment of this tragic, inescapable force, a reminder that no one could escape the judgment of the gods, and no one could outrun the passage of time. But then came Oedipus, the king whose fate was already written in the stars. Oedipus, who had fled his home to escape the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother, found himself in Thebes, unknowingly about to face his destiny. When he arrived in Thebes, the city was in turmoil. The people were desperate for a savior, and they had heard of the riddle of the Sphinx. Oedipus, like many before him, approached the beast with a sense of determination. The challenge was set, and the riddle was posed. With the wisdom of a ruler, Oedipus immediately answered correctly, man. With his answer, he not only defeated the Sphinx, but also freed Thebes from her grasp, bringing an end to the terror that had plagued the city for so long. But while Oedipus's victory over the Sphinx was celebrated as a heroic triumph, it was also the beginning of his tragic downfall. For Oedipus, defeating the Sphinx was the first step in fulfilling the very prophecy he had tried to avoid. His victory, rather than being a sign of his wisdom and strength, became a symbol of the inevitability of fate. Oedipus, though hailed as a hero, was unknowingly moving closer to his tragic end. The prophecy that had driven him away from his family had always been out of his reach. But now, with the death of the Sphinx, Oedipus had unknowingly fulfilled part of it. He would later marry Jocasta, his mother, and kill Laius, his father, completing the cycle of fate that had been foretold. The Sphinx, in her role as a challenge to Oedipus, is not just a monster of the physical world, but a manifestation of the larger forces of fate and destiny that control the lives of mortals. She represents the inescapable nature of fate, a force that cannot be outrun, no matter how clever, brave, or wise one might be. Her riddle is a reminder that life is full of challenges and that every answer has its consequences. Oedipus's victory over the Sphinx may seem like a moment of triumph, but in the context of Greek mythology, it is a tragic reminder that every hero's journey is often shaped by the gods' will. The gods, though they might grant victories, also lay out the path to a tragic end, a path that cannot be avoided. The Sphinx herself is a symbol of knowledge, wisdom, and the passage of time. Her riddle represents the complexity of human existence, while her death at the hands of Oedipus foreshadows the darker, unavoidable truths of the world. The Sphinx is not simply a monster to be slain, but a guardian of fate, a figure that stands between life and death, between the known and the unknown. The Sphinx also embodies the dual nature of wisdom. While her riddle tests the intellect, her nature also serves as a reminder of the limitations of human understanding. Oedipus's answer to the riddle was clever, but it was also an answer that, in the larger scope of his life, led to his tragic fate. His ability to solve the Sphinx's riddle did not protect him from the forces of destiny, and his subsequent downfall was inevitable. In this way, the Sphinx is both a symbol of the power of knowledge and a cautionary tale about the limits of human understanding. The riddle she posed was a test of intellect, but it also challenged Oedipus to confront the deeper mysteries of his own life, mysteries that, despite all his wisdom, he could not escape. The story of the Sphinx and Oedipus is not just about a monster and a riddle. It is a profound meditation on the nature of fate, wisdom, and the unknowable forces that shape our lives. The Sphinx, with her deadly riddle, stands as a reminder that knowledge is both a gift and a curse, that the search for answers can lead us to deeper truths, but also deeper dangers. For in the world of Greek mythology, the gods and monsters are never merely obstacles to be overcome. They are the instruments of fate itself, guiding mortals towards their destinies, no matter how tragic or heroic they may be. Deep within the rugged, untamed landscapes of ancient Greece, there lived a race of giants, creatures whose size and strength surpassed that of any mortal man. These were the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants whose towering forms and primal power made them some of the most terrifying beings in Greek mythology. Their one glaring eye, which sat in the center of their foreheads, was as much a symbol of their might as it was of their strange, almost alien nature. The Cyclopes were a race of powerful, solitary creatures who lived far from the civilization of men, in isolated regions such as remote islands and caves. They were known for their immense physical strength, and unlike most creatures of Greek myth, they were not bound by the usual rules of human behavior. They lived in a world of their own, untouched by the concerns of gods or men, and their only focus was on their own needs and desires. Among the Cyclopes, there was one who stood out above all others, Polyphemus, the most famous of them all. Polyphemus was a terrifying figure, whose immense size and strength were matched only by his brutal nature. His home was a cave on the island of the Cyclopes, where he lived alone, tending to his sheep and living a life free from the constraints of society. But Polyphemus would soon become entangled with the greatest hero of the ancient world, Odysseus, the king of Ithaca. After the Trojan War, Odysseus and his men set sail for home, hoping to return to their families after years of war. However, their journey was fraught with challenges, and the gods had their own plans for the hero. One of the most famous and perilous encounters Odysseus would face was his meeting with Polyphemus, the Cyclops. Odysseus and his men arrived on the island of the Cyclopes, seeking shelter and food. They stumbled upon Polyphemus's cave, where they found his stash of food and sheep. Tempted by the provisions, they made themselves at home, unaware of the terrible danger that awaited them. When Polyphemus returned to his cave, he was furious to find intruders in his domain. He immediately trapped them inside by rolling a massive stone in front of the entrance, a stone that only he had the strength to move. As the Cyclops settled into his cave for the night, Odysseus and his men realized the full extent of their predicament. Polyphemus was not just a giant. He was a savage creature who cared for nothing but his own will. He began to devour Odysseus' men one by one, eating them for dinner with terrifying ease. Odysseus, ever the strategist, knew that brute strength alone would not save them. The Cyclops was far too powerful for any of them to defeat in direct combat. Instead, Odysseus devised a plan that would rely on wit and cunning rather than muscle. He knew that Polyphemus, though a giant, was not entirely without intelligence. If Odysseus could outsmart him, he might be able to escape. The first part of Odysseus's plan was simple yet effective. He introduced himself to Polyphemus as Nobody, telling the Cyclops that his name was Nobody, so that when the time came to execute his plan, Polyphemus's cries for help would be misunderstood. Polyphemus, believing Odysseus to be harmless, agreed to let him live for the moment. The next step in Odysseus' plan was to get Polyphemus drunk. He and his men gave the Cyclops wine, enough to make him fall into a deep sleep. Once Polyphemus was unconscious, Odysseus and his men took a massive wooden stake, hardened it in the fire, and drove it into the Cyclops' only eye. The giant roared in pain, but he could not see, and his fury was confused by the fact that he could not understand who had attacked him. When Polyphemus screamed for help, he called out to the other Cyclopes on the island, but when they arrived, they asked him who had done this. Polyphemus, still dazed and confused, could only reply, "Nobody." His cries for help were thus ignored, and the men managed to escape from the cave by hiding under the sheep, knowing that Polyphemus would not be able to see them as they slipped out. In the end, Odysseus and his men managed to escape from Polyphemus's island, but the victory came at a cost. As they sailed away, Odysseus, in a moment of pride, revealed his true identity to Polyphemus, taunting him with his cleverness. This act of hubris would prove to be disastrous, as Polyphemus, in his rage, called upon his father, Poseidon, to curse Odysseus. The curse that Polyphemus set in motion would lead to many more trials for Odysseus on his journey home, prolonging his voyage and causing the deaths of many of his men. The story of Odysseus and Polyphemus is one of the most famous tales in Greek mythology, and it is a story that highlights the clash between intellect and strength. Polyphemus, with his immense physical power, represents brute force, the natural world's overwhelming ability to destroy. Odysseus, on the other hand, represents the cleverness of the human mind, the ability to outthink and outmaneuver even the most powerful enemies. In Greek mythology, this conflict between intellect and strength is a common theme. The gods, monsters, and heroes often embody one of these two qualities, and it is through their interaction that we learn valuable lessons about the nature of power. While strength can defeat many foes, it is often intellect and wisdom that lead to the ultimate victory. But the story also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride. Odysseus's victory over Polyphemus was, in many ways, a triumph of cleverness over brute strength. Yet, his decision to reveal his identity and taunt the Cyclops was a classic moment of hubris, excessive pride that leads to one's downfall. In the world of Greek mythology, this theme of hubris is a constant reminder that no matter how clever or powerful one may be, the gods are always watching, and the consequences of overstepping one's bounds can be catastrophic. The story of Polyphemus and Odysseus is not just a story of physical struggle, it is also a story about fate, pride, and the limits of human intelligence. The Cyclops, though a beast of strength, ultimately serves as a tool for Odysseus to confront the darker sides of his own character. Polyphemus's curse on Odysseus was a direct result of his pride, and it was the gods' way of reminding the hero that no matter how clever he was still subject to their whims and to the forces of fate. The Cyclops, as a figure, represents the natural, primal force of the world, a force that must be respected but can never be fully controlled. In the end, it is not just Odysseus's physical prowess, but his intellect and his ability to use his mind to outwit the enemy that allows him to survive the encounter. However, the price of his cleverness is high, reminding us that even victory over the most powerful forces in nature comes with its own consequences. In the shadowy corners of Greek mythology, where the boundary between the known world and the unknown is ever shifting, there exists a group of creatures so fearsome and loathsome that their very mention evokes an image of chaos and torment. These were the Harpies, winged women with the bodies of birds, known not for their beauty or grace, but for their ravenous hunger, their tormenting presence, and the terror they brought to mortals. The Harpies were often depicted as frightening, grotesque creatures with sharp talons and wings that beat with an ominous force. Their faces were those of women, but their bodies were those of large birds, with feathers that shimmered darkly in the air. These creatures were not merely birds of prey. They were agents of torment, sent to punish and harry those who had fallen foul of the gods. The name Harpies comes from the Greek word harpazein, meaning to snatch, and indeed, the primary role of the Harpies was to steal food and cause suffering. But they were not just thieves, they were tormentors, punishing the innocent by depriving them of sustenance and peace. In one of the most famous stories involving the Harpies, we find the tragic tale of Phineus, a king who was cursed by Zeus. Phineus had once been granted the gift of prophecy, but after revealing too much of the future, he angered the gods. As a punishment, the Harpies were sent to torment him. They would swoop down upon him, stealing his food and leaving only a foul stench behind. No matter how much food he was given, the Harpies would always come, taking it from him and leaving him to starve in his misery. Phineus, desperate to escape this punishment, sought the help of the Argonauts, the band of heroes led by Jason on their quest for the Golden Fleece. When the Argonauts arrived, they witnessed the torment of Phineus and vowed to rid him of the Harpies. Using their wits, they set a trap for the Harpies by offering food to Phineus once again. As the Harpies swooped down to steal it, they were confronted by Zetes and Calais, the winged sons of Boreas, the north wind. With their own wings, Zetes and Calais chased the Harpies away, driving them from Phineus' kingdom and ending the curse that had plagued him. The Harpies' encounter with Phineus is not only a tale of vengeance, but also one of divine punishment and the chaos that the gods could unleash upon mortals. The Harpies were the instruments of this chaos, embodying the harshness of divine retribution and the unpredictability of the gods' will. They were not simply creatures that tormented men. They were symbols of divine justice, sent to enforce the will of the gods upon the world of mortals. The Harpies were also involved in the story of Aeneas, the hero of the Aeneid by the Roman poet Virgil. In this epic, the Trojans, led by Aeneas, are sailing towards their promised land. As they make their way across the seas, they land on the Strophides, the islands of the Harpies. There, they are attacked by the Harpies, who descend upon their camp and steal their food. The Trojans, like Phineus before them, are unable to stop the Harpies, who leave only destruction in their wake. In response, Aeneas and his men are forced to confront the Harpies and seek an answer to their torment. As in the tale of Phineus, the Trojans are given the opportunity to defeat the Harpies, and through divine intervention, they are given the means to escape their punishment. The Harpies' intervention in this story serves as a reminder of the unpredictable, capricious nature of fate and the gods, who can both help and hinder the heroes at will. The Harpies, as tormentors sent by the gods, embody several key themes in Greek mythology. First and foremost, they are symbols of punishment. Their very existence is tied to the idea of divine retribution, the idea that those who transgress against the gods or fate will be punished, often in ways that are both cruel and unjust. The Harpies were not born out of malice, but rather as instruments of divine will, punishing mortals for their sins or transgressions. In a broader sense, the Harpies also represent the chaos that lies at the heart of the natural and divine world. While the gods often embody order and control, they also wield the power of chaos and destruction. The Harpies, in their chaotic behavior, reflect the nature of the world itself, a world where even the strongest mortals and the wisest heroes must contend with forces beyond their control. The Harpies' torment of Phineus and the Trojans illustrates the randomness of divine punishment and the inevitability of fate. The Harpies also serve as a reminder of the unpredictability of divine justice. Unlike human justice, which is based on laws and reason, the justice of the gods is often unfair, capricious, and at times incomprehensible. The Harpies act as enforcers of this justice, swooping down upon their victims without warning or mercy. In this sense, they are not just punishers, but symbols of fate, representing the uncontrollable forces that govern the lives of both mortals and gods alike. Despite their monstrous nature, the Harpies' story also illustrates the theme of redemption and escape from fate. While they are agents of punishment, their defeat by the Argonauts and Aeneas marks the hero's ability to challenge and overcome the forces that seek to destroy them. In both stories, the gods' punishment is not absolute. It can be overcome with courage, intelligence, and sometimes even divine intervention. The Harpies, in this sense, represent the tension between fate and free will. They are tools of fate, but they are not all-powerful. Through the intervention of heroes, the Harpies' torment can be ended, and those who have been cursed can be freed from their suffering. The defeat of the Harpies thus reflects the idea that while we may be subject to the will of the gods, there is always a possibility of escape, a chance to overcome the chaos and find peace. The Harpies, in their role as tormentors, serve as a reminder of the chaos that can emerge from both the natural and divine world. Their chaotic, unpredictable nature is a central theme in Greek mythology, where fate and justice are often intertwined in ways that mortals can scarcely understand. But their defeat also teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming torment, there is always hope, and there is always the possibility of redemption. In the end, the Harpies are not just creatures of destruction, but symbols of the trials and challenges that every hero must face, the chaos that lies at the heart of the universe, and the courage required to navigate it. In the darkest corners of Greek mythology, where the line between the human world and the supernatural blurs, there exists a creature whose very existence embodies both fear and desire. This creature, Empusa, is a shape-shifting monster known for her ability to manipulate and deceive, feeding not only on human blood but on the life force itself. She is a figure wrapped in shadows and seduction, a being whose appearance is ever-changing and whose hunger is insatiable. Empusa is often depicted as a seductive woman, but one whose beauty is deceptive, a mask for the monstrous and horrific creature she truly is. She is the daughter of Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, magic, and the underworld. As a servant of Hecate, Empusa carries with her the same association with the supernatural forces that shape the destinies of mortals, a force that is both mysterious and terrifying. Empusa's most notable characteristic is her shape-shifting ability. She can transform her form at will, often taking on the appearance of a beautiful woman to lure men into a false sense of security. Once her prey is close enough, she reveals her true nature, a monster with a lower body that is often depicted as that of a donkey or some other grotesque feature, and her eyes burning with hunger. Her true form is not only terrifying but also reflects her dual nature, a seductive beauty that is inextricably linked to destruction. Empusa's ability to shift her shape is a reflection of the idea of deception in Greek mythology. She uses her ability to manipulate human emotions, particularly desire and fear, to prey on her victims. She lures them with the promise of intimacy, seducing them with her beauty before draining their life force and consuming them in a violent and horrifying way. In this sense, Empusa is not just a monster, she is a symbol of the danger that lurks behind the surface of attraction and desire. Her victims are not simply killed, they are manipulated, led to their doom by their own emotions. In many versions of the myth, Empusa is described as a servant of Hecate, and this relationship is significant in understanding her role in Greek mythology. Hecate herself is a goddess associated with death, magic, and the underworld. She is a figure who straddles the line between light and dark, and her worshippers often seek her out for guidance in matters of the unseen. Empusa, as a servant of Hecate, embodies the darker aspects of Hecate's domain, the manipulation of life and death, the crossing of boundaries, and the use of fear as a tool of control. In Greek mythology, Hecate often serves as a mediator between the mortal world and the supernatural, guiding those who seek her out, but also punishing those who transgress the natural order. Empusa, as one of Hecate's agents, reflects this same dual nature. She is both a tool of death and a creature who thrives on fear and desire, using these forces to control and consume. Empusa's power lies not just in her physical strength or shape-shifting ability, but in her ability to manipulate human emotions. She embodies the dangers of unchecked desire, using it as a means to ensnare her victims. Desire, in Greek mythology, is often portrayed as both a powerful and dangerous force, one that can lead to both creation and destruction. Empusa's ability to harness this force and use it to prey on the weakness of her victims highlights the complexity of human nature, how vulnerability and attraction can lead to doom. In a sense, Empusa represents the dangerous allure of the unknown, the desire for what seems unattainable or forbidden. Her power is seductive, and her appearance, both alluring and grotesque, is a physical manifestation of the tension between beauty and horror, attraction and revulsion. Her shape-shifting nature makes her an embodiment of the duality of human experience, where what seems beautiful on the surface can often hide something far darker beneath. Empusa is not the only figure in Greek mythology to embody these dual aspects of desire and fear. She is related to other supernatural beings like the Lamia and the Styges, both of whom also prey on human desire and fear. These figures, Though they vary in their characteristics and roles, all share a common thread. They are creatures that exist on the border between the real and the supernatural, using their powers to manipulate mortals in ways that lead to their destruction. The idea of manipulation, particularly through desire and fear, is central to Empusa's role in Greek mythology. She is a cautionary figure, a reminder of the dangers of giving in to temptation and the ways in which our emotions can be used against us. The myth of Empusa warns that our desires, if unchecked, can lead us to our undoing. That which is most alluring can often be the most dangerous. In this way, Empusa represents the dark side of the human psyche, the part of us that seeks pleasure and satisfaction without considering the consequences. Her role as a servant of Hecate also links her to the idea of death and the afterlife. Just as Hecate oversees the realm of the dead and the transitions between life and death, Empusa acts as a guide to those who succumb to their desires, leading them into the realm of death. She serves as a reminder of the inevitable pull of fate, that no matter how enticing life may seem, death always lurks just beneath the surface. In the end, Empusa's story is not just one of terror, but one of warning. She represents the dangers of unchecked desires, the fear of the unknown, and the fragility of human nature in the face of supernatural forces. Her shape-shifting form is a metaphor for the complexity of the world around us, where beauty and danger often coexist, and where the forces that shape our lives are not always what they seem. Empusa's presence in Greek mythology is a reflection of the fears and desires that plague all mortals. She reminds us that in the pursuit of pleasure, we must be cautious, for the line between satisfaction and destruction is often thin and easily crossed. As a servant of Hecate, she is a reminder that the gods, in all their power, often use fear and desire as tools to shape the fate of mortals, guiding them toward their ultimate ends. In the heart of ancient Greece, at the site of what would later become the most famous oracle in the world, there once lived a creature so vast, so powerful, that it threatened the very balance of the divine. This creature was Python, a giant serpent whose very name would come to symbolize the struggle for control, both divine and mortal. Python was a primordial monster, born from the chaos of the earth, and she had a singular, terrifying purpose: to guard the sacred land of Delphi. The mountain of Parnassus, upon which Delphi would be built, was seen as a place of great spiritual significance, a spot where the heavens and the earth met. Python, with her massive coils and unyielding power, was the protector of this sacred space. But as with many of the creatures in Greek mythology, her role as guardian was not one of peace, it was one of violence and dominance. Python had claimed Delphi for herself, and her presence there was a sign of the earth's primal, untamed forces. She was a symbol of the ancient powers that predated the Olympian gods, a force that stood in opposition to the rising order of the new gods, led by Zeus and his divine family. However, the story of Python is not merely one of domination by a monstrous serpent. It is a tale of divine struggle and the battle for control of prophecy and fate. For Python's fate would not be decided by brute strength alone. It would be shaped by the will of Apollo, the god of prophecy, music, and the Sunday. Apollo, the son of Zeus and the Titaness Leto, was one of the most powerful and revered gods of the Olympian pantheon. He was the god of light, truth, and knowledge, and his influence over prophecy was unparalleled. But Apollo's journey to power was not without its struggles, and one of his most famous early battles was with Python. When Apollo came of age, he sought to establish his dominion over Delphi, a place of great spiritual significance. But in order to claim it, he had to defeat Python, the guardian of the sacred land. The battle between Apollo and Python would be a momentous event in the history of Greek mythology, for it marked the transition from the ancient, chaotic forces of the earth to the ordered, enlightened rule of the Olympian gods. Apollo, armed with his bow and arrows, confronted Python at Delphi. Python, sensing the threat to her domain, coiled her massive body and prepared to strike. The battle between Apollo and the serpent was one of great intensity, a clash of divine power against primal chaos. The serpent, though immense and terrifying, was no match for Apollo's divine might. With a single shot from his golden bow, Apollo struck Python, sending an arrow deep into her massive form. The battle between Apollo and Python was not just a physical one. It was symbolic of the larger conflict between order and chaos. Apollo, representing the forces of light, reason, and divine order, stood in stark contrast to Python, who embodied the ancient, untamed powers of the earth. The serpent's death was not just the slaying of a monster, it was the triumph of the Olympian gods over the older, more chaotic forces that had once ruled the world. After Python was slain, Apollo claimed Delphi as his own, establishing it as the site of the Delphic oracle, the most powerful oracle in the ancient world. Here, the priestess of Apollo, known as the Pythia, would deliver prophecies, offering guidance to kings, heroes, and commoners alike. The oracle at Delphi became the center of Greek religious life, and it was said that Apollo himself would speak through the Pythia, offering wisdom and foresight to those who sought it. The slaying of Python and Apollo's subsequent control of Delphi symbolizes the transition from chaos to order, from the ancient, primal forces to the more structured, divine rule of the Olympian gods. But this victory was not without consequence. The act of killing Python was not merely an act of violence. It was a symbolic conquest of the earth's natural forces by the gods, and it set the stage for the Olympians' rise to power. In Greek mythology, the gods are often depicted as battling for dominion over the world, and Apollo's triumph over Python marks his establishment as one of the most important gods in the pantheon. The role of Delphi and the oracle, which Apollo now controlled, would become central to many Greek myths. Kings and heroes alike would travel to Delphi seeking advice and forewarning. The oracle was not just a place of spiritual insight, but also a seat of political power. By controlling Delphi, Apollo cemented his influence over the fate of both mortals and gods. The slaying of Python is also a representation of the conflict between nature and civilization, a recurring theme in Greek mythology. Python, as a creature born of the earth, represents the untamed, chaotic forces that exist in the natural world. Apollo, as a god of civilization and enlightenment, represents the triumph of knowledge, reason, and order. The death of Python is a metaphor for the rise of culture and civilization over the primal forces of nature. It symbolizes the idea that in Greek mythology, the gods are not just forces of creation, but forces of transformation, changing the world and shaping it in their image. However, it is important to note that while Apollo's victory over Python represents the victory of order over chaos, it also highlights the balance of power between the gods and the natural world. Apollo, though victorious, does not destroy the earth itself, but rather seeks to master it, to claim dominion over it through his power and influence. The myth reminds us that even as the gods establish their reign, they must always contend with the forces of nature, which are never fully subdued. In the end, the death of Python and the rise of Apollo's oracle at Delphi signify the dominance of the Olympian gods and their influence over the world of mortals. It is a reminder of the gods' control over prophecy and fate, and of the ways in which the divine world shaped the destinies of mortals. The oracle at Delphi would continue to serve as a beacon of divine wisdom, guiding the lives of heroes and kings alike. And Apollo's victory over Python was the first step in establishing the foundation for this influence. In the depths of Greek mythology, there exists a group of creatures whose beauty is rivaled only by the danger they bring. These are the sirens, dangerous, alluring beings whose haunting songs are both their weapon and their curse. The sirens are often depicted as half woman, half bird, their figures graceful and their voices sweet. But beneath their enchanting exterior lies a deadly force capable of luring even the most stalwart of men to their doom. The sirens lived on isolated islands, their songs carried across the waves like an irresistible siren call. Sailors, drawn to the sound of their voices, would unknowingly steer their ships toward the rocks, where the jagged cliffs would tear the vessels apart, sending the sailors to their deaths. The sirens, their mission complete, would feast on the remains of the wrecked ships and their crews, endlessly repeating their deadly song. But the sirens were not merely mindless creatures driven by hunger. Their songs held a deep, tragic allure, a combination of beauty and danger that symbolized the powerful force of temptation. The sirens represented the allure of danger itself, the way in which the most perilous things can be wrapped in beauty, making them irresistible to those who encounter them. Perhaps the most famous encounter with the sirens is found in Homer's Odyssey, when Odysseus, the great hero of the Trojan War, is on his long and arduous journey home. As Odysseus and his men sail toward their eventual return to Ithaca, they must pass through the dangerous waters where the sirens sing. The myth tells us that any man who hears the sirens' song will be compelled to sail towards them, only to meet his death on the rocks. Odysseus, knowing of the danger, orders his men to block their ears with beeswax so that they cannot hear the sirens' song. However, curious and determined to experience it for himself, Odysseus orders that he be tied to the mast of his ship, instructing his men not to release him, no matter how much he begs or commands them to do so. As they approach the Sirens' Island, the air fills with their mesmerizing voices, offering promises of knowledge and secret wisdom, the kind of forbidden knowledge that only the gods and the most powerful mortals could hope to possess. The Siren's song is described as a sweet, seductive melody that seems to promise everything Odysseus has longed for: answers to his questions, secrets of the universe, and the ultimate understanding of life and fate. For a moment, Odysseus is overwhelmed by the song, his heart burning with the desire to sail toward the source of the music. He begs his men to release him, but they obey his earlier instructions, sailing on, unaware of the danger he is in. Despite his desperate pleas, Odysseus is bound to the mast and unable to act on his desire. As the ship sails further away from the Sirens' Island, their song fades, and Odysseus is released from his chains. In the end, he is saved not by his strength or cunning, but by his ability to resist the Sirens' temptation through the foresight of his earlier plan. The Sirens' role in the Odyssey is not just that of a threat to Odysseus's physical journey, but a reflection of the deeper psychological and emotional struggles that we all face. The sirens represent the irresistible allure of temptation, the desire to give in to our deepest wishes, no matter the consequences. In Odysseus's case, his longing to hear the sirens' song mirrors the universal human desire for knowledge and understanding, the wish to see beyond the veil of the ordinary world and grasp the deeper truths of existence. However, this desire is also destructive. The siren's song is a metaphor for the way in which unchecked desire can lead to destruction. Just as Odysseus and his men are drawn toward the song, so too are we often drawn to temptations that seem to promise fulfillment but ultimately lead to harm. In Greek mythology, The gods often use such temptations as tests to see if the hero can resist the allure of the dangerous and forbidden. By ordering himself tied to the mast, Odysseus is, in essence, showing great wisdom. He understands that while the siren's song is irresistible, it is also dangerous, and the only way to survive it is to remain detached from it. His decision to experience the temptation, but in a controlled and safe manner, reflects a key lesson in Greek thought: the importance of self-control in the face of overwhelming desires. The sirens also represent the tragic nature of overindulgence. In Greek mythology, the gods are frequently portrayed as embodying the extremes of human emotion and experience, from love and anger to desire and fear. The sirens, with their seductive powers, are embodiments of the dangers of indulging too much in our desires. Their song is not simply a lure, it is a trap, one that transforms the longing for something more into an obsession that leads only to destruction. In many ways, the siren's influence parallels the human struggle with the concept of overindulgence. The allure of indulgence, whether it be in the form of desire, greed, or curiosity, can lead to the loss of one's path, just as the sirens lead sailors into their deaths. In Odysseus's case, his foresight and ability to resist this dangerous temptation represent his wisdom as a leader and hero. He teaches us that while curiosity and desire are natural parts of the human experience, restraint is necessary for survival. The sirens also remind us that temptation is a universal force, one that every hero and mortal must face. Odysseus's struggle against them is one of the many trials he faces on his journey home, a journey that symbolizes the journey of life itself, where every individual must navigate the many forces that pull us in different directions. In the larger scope of Greek mythology, the sirens are not just a threat to Odysseus. They are symbols of the forces that exist beyond human control, forces that must be understood and resisted in order to survive. Their seductive nature and ability to control the will of mortals make them potent symbols of the struggle between reason and impulse, between wisdom and desire. For Odysseus, as for all of us, the key to overcoming such temptations lies in the ability to act with foresight, wisdom, and self-discipline. In the hills near ancient Rome, there lived a creature whose very name became synonymous with evil and wrongdoing: Cacus, a fire-breathing monster whose actions would lead to a confrontation with one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. Though Cacus is often overshadowed by the more famous monsters and gods of Greek myth, his story is one of both crime and punishment, where justice is served through a mighty act of strength and righteousness. Cacus was a terrifying creature, half man and half monster, who lived in a cave on the Palatine Hill, not far from the growing city of Rome. He was no ordinary beast. Cacus possessed the ability to breathe fire, a terrifying and destructive power that allowed him to wreak havoc on anyone who dared approach his domain. His monstrous nature was matched only by his cunning and malicious intent. Cacus, however, was not just a typical monster. He was a thief, and it was through his theft that he became a key figure in the mythology of early Rome. The myth surrounding Cacus centers around his theft of cattle, an act that would set the stage for a legendary battle between him and Heracles, the greatest of the Greek heroes. Cacus, having seen the large herd of cattle belonging to Geryon, a three-bodied giant, and another of the monstrous offspring of Echidna and Typhon, decided to steal them. But he did not simply take them in the usual way. Instead, he led the cattle into his cave and, to hide his crime, he dragged the cattle backward, so that their footprints would appear to lead out of the cave, as though they had wandered away on their own. This trickery allowed Cacus to evade detection, and he believed that he had committed the perfect crime. However, Cacus had underestimated the power and wisdom of Heracles, who was passing through the region on his 12 labors. As he traveled, Heracles and his men noticed that the cattle had gone missing, and when they found the strange backward footprints, they quickly deduced that Cacus was the thief. Heracles, driven by his sense of justice and his determination to complete his tasks, tracked the stolen cattle back to Cacus's cave. When Heracles confronted Cacus, the monster attempted to use his fire-breathing abilities to scare the hero away. But Heracles, undeterred by the flames and knowing that he had the strength to defeat the beast, engaged in a fierce battle with Cacus. Despite Cacus's fiery breath and the rocky terrain of his cave, Heracles fought on, using his incredible strength and combat skill to overpower the monster. In the end, Heracles succeeded where others had failed, slaying Cacus and returning the stolen cattle to their rightful owner. This victory was not just a triumph of strength over brute force. It was a victory of justice, as Heracles had righted the wrong committed by Cacus. The story of Cacus and Heracles is deeply rooted in the theme of justice and the punishment of wrongdoing. Cacus's theft of the cattle represents the disruption of order, the violation of the natural laws that governed both mortals and gods. The theft itself was an act of selfishness and greed, one that Cacus carried out not only against the cattle, but also against the social order that protected property and life. By taking what did not belong to him, Cacus set in motion a chain of events that would lead to his downfall. Heracles' response to Cacus is one of divine justice. His victory over Cacus is not simply a personal triumph, but a reminder that in Greek mythology, justice is often delivered by the gods themselves or through heroes like Heracles. Though Cacus had committed his crime in secrecy, he could not escape the natural order of the universe, which dictated that his wrongdoings would eventually be exposed and punished. In Greek mythology, justice is a recurring theme. Gods and mortals alike are often tested, and those who break the laws of order, whether divine or human, must face the consequences. The gods themselves are not always impartial. They may act with anger or favor depending on the situation. However, when a hero like Heracles steps in to restore order, it is often a reminder that the natural world and its laws must be upheld, and that punishment is necessary to restore balance. Cacus's defeat also serves as a lesson about reckoning and the inevitability of facing consequences for one's actions. Like many monsters in Greek mythology, Cacus represents the forces of chaos and disorder that must be contained. In defeating him, Heracles restores balance, not just for the cattle and their rightful owner, but for the world itself. The story shows that even the most cunning and powerful beings, like Cacus, cannot escape the laws of justice, and that no act of wrongdoing, no matter how cleverly concealed, will go unpunished in the end. Moreover, the defeat of Cacus also touches upon the idea of retribution, that the punishment must fit the crime. Cacus, having stolen the cattle, was defeated in a battle where his strength and deceit were no match for the heroic might and righteousness of Heracles. This theme of proportional justice is central to many myths, where the gods or heroes act to right the wrongs committed by monsters and villains. In the broader context of Greek mythology, Cacus's story aligns with the themes of cosmic order and divine retribution. While the gods themselves are often seen as the ultimate arbiters of fate and justice, they also rely on heroes like Heracles to act as agents of their will, restoring balance where it has been disrupted. Just as Heracles defeated Cacus, other heroes and gods would play similar roles in myths, punishing those who violated divine laws and restoring peace and order to the world. The tale of Cacus serves as a reminder that wrongdoings, no matter how carefully hidden or how much power one possesses will eventually be exposed, and justice will be served. It is a reflection of the Greek belief in the inevitable triumph of order over chaos, where even the most fearsome monsters must answer to the forces of fate and divine justice. Through Heracles' victory, the world is reminded of the necessity of upholding justice, of the need to right the wrongs of the world, and of the ultimate victory of order over chaos. Caecus, though a fierce and terrifying monster, is vanquished, and with his defeat, the world of Greek mythology remains in balance, where justice is always restored, no matter the odds. And so, we have journeyed through the captivating and sometimes terrifying world of Greek monsters, each one a unique force of nature, a symbol of the challenges, fears, and trials that shaped the lives of the ancient Greeks. From the ferocious Hydra to the alluring sirens, and from the cunning Cacus to the mighty Heracles, we have explored the timeless stories that have left their mark on history. As we reflect on these incredible creatures, it becomes clear that they were never just monsters in the traditional sense. They were embodiments of the human condition, reflections of the fears, desires, and struggles that every civilization must face. These creatures represented the forces of chaos, destruction, and temptation, but they also symbolized the constant battle between order and disorder, between the known and the unknown. In ancient Greece, mythology was not merely a collection of stories to entertain or frighten. It was a way of understanding the world, a lens through which the Greeks could make sense of the chaos around them. The monsters of Greek mythology were often more than just adversaries to be slain. They were metaphors for the internal and external struggles that the Greek people faced. From the internal struggle of temptation, represented by the sirens, to the external battles with creatures like Scylla and Charybdis, these myths provided a framework for grappling with life's uncertainties and the forces of fate. Each monster told a story of confrontation, the confrontation between humanity and the forces that sought to overwhelm it. These monsters, whether born from the earth, the sea, or the gods themselves, acted as both obstacles and teachers. They taught the ancient Greeks the importance of wisdom, strength, and cunning. They also reflected the complex interplay between human agency and the uncontrollable forces of the divine and natural worlds. Perhaps, in our modern lives, we can still find ourselves facing similar monsters, struggles, and challenges that seem larger than life, impossible to overcome. And yet, the lessons from these ancient stories remain with us. We, too, are reminded that facing our fears and confronting the chaos in our lives requires not just strength, but wisdom, patience, and sometimes a touch of cunning. As we come to the end of our mythical journey, let us remember that mythology, though ancient, still resonates deeply with us today. It continues to shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. These stories are not merely relics of the past. They are living narratives, still capable of offering insight, comfort, and inspiration. The monsters we've encountered, though often fearsome and destructive, also represent growth, resilience, and the hope that, no matter how great the challenge, we can find a way to overcome it. Whether through wisdom, courage, or the support of those we trust, we can face even the darkest of times and emerge victorious, just as the heroes of old did. So, as you prepare to drift off into peaceful rest, carry with you the quiet strength of the heroes who overcame their fears, and the reminder that even the most formidable challenges can be conquered. Just like Odysseus, Heracles, and all the others before us, we too can navigate the monsters in our lives and find our way forward. Thank you for joining me on this mythical adventure. I hope the stories we shared have brought you a sense of peace and wonder. And as you drift off to sleep, may you take the strength and wisdom of these ancient tales with you. Before we wrap up, if you found the content useful, please like and subscribe. And now get some good rest. And may dreams of heroes, monsters, and the wonders of the gods guide you through the night. Good night, and sleep peacefully.